All right, hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast. My name is Eddie V. Hill, and I am your host. This is episode number 88, and joining me today is Dayna Smith.
Hello.
And Henry Brower.
How's it going?
Great. These are directors and producers of a feature film documentary that's currently got a Kickstarter running called 30 On. Yeah, do you want let's talk about that?
Okay.
Sure, yeah. So we started shooting this doc in 2018, this summer. It primarily focuses on Race Across America, which is what they call the world's toughest bicycle race. It goes 3,000 miles from Oceanside, California, all the way to Annapolis, Maryland. So it's obviously a treacherous race. We met this guy named Tim Skipper, who is the captain of Team Skipper, and he's just an incredible athlete. He's done this race 20 times now, this last summer. And he holds the record for the most crossings of this race. So obviously a very interesting guy and an incredible feat of resilience and motivation, and it's quite a story.
Okay, yeah, I guess the place to start may be for us to get some context on A, the race, and B, how you two came to be the leading filmmakers on tracking this race. So what's the origin story for this collaboration between you two and Team Skipper, and how,
So Henry and I went to film school together at CSUN, and Cal State University Northridge. So 2018 we started, and so we both graduated like 2017, right? You were too, right?
Yeah.
And so we were like, a year out of film school. We're like working in the industry, freelancing. And, as a freelancer, you do all kinds of weird stuff to find jobs.
Yeah.
And he called me one day and was just like, "Are you sitting down?" I don't remember if he said that, but he was basically like, "I have this crazy thing. He just like pitched it to me. He was like, "I met this guy. I like responded to a Craigslist ad. He's like looking for people to film this race, but he's also looking for crew, like race crew." And it was funny because when I was younger, my mom used to send me like Craigslist postings as like a way to be like
watch out for Craigslist kind of thing?
No, it was like she was like trying to like help me get jobs. It was like kind of cute, but like most of it was usually like stuff that like I don't even do. It would be like, because like, we're both script supervisors, and she would send me things for like be like anything with the word like supervisor in it. It'd be like production supervisor or something. Like, Mom, that's not what I do.
Yeah.
But anyway, she had sent me that same ad like a week prior, and I just kind of dismissed it. But then
I didn't know
that part. You did at one point, but it's been a long time. And then so Henry called me and explained the whole thing. And the thing about Henry is he's very convincing when he wants to be.
Nice.
And he doesn't back down. But also he's just like very enthusiastic about like everything that he does. And so basically just like got me on board. He was like, "It starts in a week." I've got my friend Dan, who is one of our producers as well. Got my friend Dan on board. Like, I'm going to hit up Suarez, who was our DP, and we also went to CSUN with him. And we just kind of like threw it together in like a week and a half or something before we left. We just kind of like showed up in Oceanside with our cameras and did this thing. And we kind of just kind of went in not knowing a whole lot.
Yeah, so before we get into how the show ran, if we will, I wanted to get Henry's take on kind of the same origin from your perspective too, because you're the one that reached out to get this ball rolling. So, what were your thoughts when you saw like this ad and stuff? Like, how did
Sure.
what's
I'd love to address the Craigslist. uh, so actually, just there's probably infinite documentary opportunities on the internet's classifieds. Who knows what interesting people. But yeah, at the time I was an assistant camera, mostly AC work, and so when you aren't working, you're just kind of searching. So I saw it, and I remember it being something like looking for drivers, navigators, mechanics, massage therapists, even. And then one of the last things was like a photographer, and I was like, "Ooh, I'll do this and shoot photography." That was my first thought. I'm like, I'm not working. I'll just show up with a camera and do that. But really, the kind of big moment was a phone call I had with Tim. And actually, me and Dan, the producer, were meeting to talk about um, a different project, Snug Fit. Yeah. Dan was giving script notes on a short, and so we were meeting specifically to talk about that. But then Tim called, and I'm like, sorry, man, I have to take this. And it's I still feel bad about it because it was rude, but we ended up having like a 30-minute conversation with Tim, and Dan was just chilling, drinking coffee. Um, but basically, Tim talked about like, oh, we can have like, what if we do a bigger documentary? And I'm
the
like,
classic what if question? Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, we can do that. We get a couple cameras, a couple more crew. Like, this story's crazy. Like, let's do it. So that was like the spark of the doc, but it was last minute. It was like a week and a half away. So I think I went back to Dan. I'm like, okay, different topic. Do you want to go across the country and film these ultra cyclists race across the country? Like, forget about this this short. Do you want to do this? And he was pretty much like, I'm in. And so yeah, and it kind of goes. Everyone else started jumping aboard, and
Okay, so yeah, you had a week to pull together a film crew of some kind to shoot this to travel across the country and shoot this cyclist team, and neither of you prior had this kind of documentary experience, or is this something? Can you remind me on like the film school background or previously on the documentary experience and how what your approach was going in, and yeah, I want to hear all about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, our backgrounds are in narrative. Um, but I mean, obviously there's tons of overlap. But we really went in, especially that first time, just eyes wide open, and we're gonna get, just literally shoot everything. And because it was our introduction to RAM as well, a lot of that early footage is like, I mean, I don't know about you, but when I watch it, I feel kind of like the kind of sense of wonder that we were all feeling, learning about this race, because we were like shooting everything because we were also trying to like learn the rules of the race and like learn why these people are doing it.
right. I
So
think that's a plus to having never done the race, is having that perspective of, yeah, we're kind of the. It's very. Well, actually, we describe it as first person, so it's like the whole thing. Um, yeah, I guess back to that question, I had also done one or a handful of sort of either live to tape or reality show type things. So I had a little bit of being familiar with the unscripted universe.
On the camera end.
Yeah, and how to approach it. But yeah, it really was, I don't know, in the spirit of indie documentary, just picking up cameras and jumping in vans and going. Obviously, years later, when we did it again, we knew exactly what was going to happen, and we were, we had a different approach to the filmmaking. But I think the pairing
We'll
of
say
the
you never
two,
know exactly what's going to happen on RAM.
you never know what's going to happen. But I think that combination of the two is what makes it have a kind of unique point of view and perspective.
Okay, yeah, I do want to maybe, I don't know if take a step back or take a step forward and talk a little bit about maybe more context on the Kickstarter itself before we get into like the stuff that I'm mostly curious about is like process and like how did the thing go and what were the things you bumped into. But for those that are watching that are less familiar with RAM Race Across America and Team Skipper, I know you have this mug here that you're
I brought this for branding.
yeah, Henry's showing it off right there. And then Dana's got the Ram sweatshirt, hat too. So I know the current the ask right now on the Kickstarter is you're trying to raise $50,000 for post production. Everything is shot. It's just getting it through post, which includes the editing and the sound mixing, the sound design stuff, the color correction, all of the things. And I know that you have it posted on the page. We'll have links to that down below and wherever else. We'll probably mention it. What's the website? Just really quick.
www.30ondoc.com.
Perfect. 100. Yeah, we'll put. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. 150 hours of footage to sift through. It's just a lot of time.
Yeah.
So for those that like, I just want to give some context on like what the story is and what's most exciting about maybe like because we put in to support you two, we put in to support Team Skipper and the team, and we also want to watch it at the end of the day. So can we give some context on the storylines that we're following and what's most exciting about the piece in general?
What was that face? Yeah. So we kind of describe it as, the first person perspective of this race across America. We are following Team Skipper and kind of Tim's journey throughout the years. As we said, he's done it 20 times. We've had the pleasure to come along for 2 of those races. So those 2 will feature heavily in the doc. We're also going to be sourcing kind of archival material from his past races. His first one was in 1996.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And his 2 sons have done it with him. I think his daughter has done it once as well. He has triplets. But his 2 sons have done it a whole bunch of times with him, both racing and as crew. I think the first time they were like 12. And so basically this race, I don't think we've mentioned it yet, but it's nonstop. So once you start, you don't stop. You're in vans, caravanning, and you're basically leapfrogging in like a relay. So one rider is on the bike and the other van will go up like 30 miles or 50 miles or whatever to drop off the next one. And they leapfrog nonstop across the country. So there's not a lot of sleep happening.
That's actually just an important note. What separates it from some of the other grand tours of the world? So Tour de France is a stage race. You do it in stages, or the Giro d'Italia, also stages. But RAM, continuous, not like 24/7. A lot of teams take 7-8 days to accomplish it, and some people even ride it solo. which can take up to 14 days nonstop. Um, so
And the way that you can break that time up any way that you want within your team, but the way that Team Skipper does it is um, roughly 30-minute pulls, which they call pulls their like leg of the transition. Um, so it's actually how we got our title 30 on, because Tim's whole thing is like, if you just focus on the 30 minutes that you're on the bike, that's all you're focusing on. You just focus on those 30 minutes, and then you have your rest and you focus on the next 30 minutes. We had a rider in 2018 that it was her first time. She was really nervous. And um, at the starting line in Oceanside, he kind of like pulled her aside and basically like gave us our thesis statement. And he was just like, you just got to focus on 30 minutes at a time. You're going to ride your bicycle for 30 minutes, and that's all you're going to focus on. And then you're going to get in the van, you're going to get some rest, and you're going to ride your bicycle for 30 more minutes. And so that's kind of the moral of the story, is basically you can accomplish anything if you take it one step at a time or 30 minutes at a time.
right. So obviously a very motivational story because it does seem, impossible. Also, notable mention, our 2018 race, it was a 4-person relay. So, you're getting back on the bike. You're on for a half hour. You're off for an hour and a half to use the restroom, to eat, to sleep, and then you're back on. In 2022, we had an 8-person team. And so it was kind of like a bigger operation. There were like 7 vans. It's almost like a caravan of sorts, to move at that speed.
So the riders got a little bit more rest.
Right, right.
Not much, but a little bit more.
Right. We even had an RV in 2022 that was like a mobile kitchen. Shout out to Maria, our chef, who was like creating meals and then like distributing them as we went. But yeah, ultimately it's a very inspiring group of people. I mean, the riders or the racers and the crew obviously don't sleep for days at a time, and the fact that they're able to do this physically and mentally is all incredibly inspiring. Um, and yeah, our racers in 2018, they were in the 50 to 60 bracket, and in 2022 they were in the 60 plus bracket. So that's also inspiring to me too, because I think it sounds difficult in general, but now someone who's 65 is riding across the country as well.
It's also just an interesting thing, like on like the mental angle of like the mentality of athletes. Like there are plenty of younger cyclists that do this race, but it does seem to lean a little bit more like retiree age. And I think, I can't remember who we have an interview of talking about it, but I think someone said like, yeah, like as you get older, you just kind of like your endurance, for not just your physical endurance, but your mental endurance just kind of zens out a little more. Because that's obviously a big theme in the doc, is just like why they do this, because it's so grueling, and like, but they like love it. And so like why, and of course Tim doing it 20 times, like what keeps you coming back year after year after year. And so it's just kind of an interesting thing to kind of dive into the psyche of these athletes.
Yeah, I know. One thing Tim talks about, and he'll tell you himself in the doc, but how it is a really difficult couple weeks. But when he's spending the rest of his year, if there's something challenging in the year, he just thinks like, oh, nothing was as challenging as when I was in Kansas facing a headwind, like having to ride through the night, or so it kind of almost, you do something really difficult and it gives you the kind of stamina and whatnot for the rest of the year. So it's almost like I don't know what other examples of it be, like when um, people take like an ice bath or something, or uh, or a cold shower, or something to kind of jumpstart it. But this is like such
Yeah,
a
right. It's
massive
like
feat. It's for
training,
the whole year. So
like training your nervous system with an ice bath.
yeah, yeah. So yes, that is an interesting thing. And honestly, I feel like we're catching the fever. We've already done it twice.
Yeah, we've literally last time when we dropped off one of our crew members once we got back into town at like 1 a.m, we dropped him off and everyone was so tired. We just kind of like said very like grumbly goodbyes, like, talk to you later. And then we were pulling away and Henry was like, I can't really tell if like did he have a good time? I can't really tell. I was like, yeah, I think he loved it. Like um everyone's just tired, but we were just like I would do this again, like even if we weren't filming. Like I don't know if it's just like it takes a certain personality or what, but like it's so fun and exhilarating. I think because you like know that there's an end point that like the suffering feels like romanticized in a way.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Is it kind of like I'm equating it to like making a movie
Mm-hmm.
where it's got to be like a contagious energy of everybody, and that common goal is just being in the environment and having that everybody loving what they're doing, everybody contributing to the thing. Like you just leave like missing that
It
feeling.
is. It
Mhm.
is. It's kind of a similar thing of like running away with the circus kind of vibe. Um, and it's just like a super intense period of time for like a relatively short amount of time.
I remember something Dan said that kind of summarizes it also. It's like maybe 3, 4 days in, it's like you forget about everything else going on. All you care about is getting the bikes up the course and you become so like locked in. And you can see that, we're talking about our experience of doing it, but we're also capturing people in that zone of like, we got to get the bikes up the road. We got to, do the next transition, wherever it's at. So that is one aspect of what it's like to do it, which we aim to capture as well.
Yeah. And you mentioned the whys for why people are doing this race and why they continue to do this race. Like you kind of explained a little bit about it there, but can you highlight a couple of the stories that stand out that we can look forward to seeing more of? Or yeah.
So they range from
Maybe starting with uh, Skipper himself too,
sure.
because yeah.
So from what we can tell, it he has multiple reasons. I mean, he loves riding his bike. It's just like the thing that
That's helpful for
gets
this
him
kind
out
of
of
yeah.
bed in the morning. And also he kind of has made it a mission to bring on new people every year to his team, both riders and crew. And he kind of seems to have this like mission statement of like getting as many people involved in RAM and to have the RAM experience as he can. Like he's done it 20 times. He's, probably brought on at least or introduced at least like 100 people to the RAM experience over the years. Um, and then there's his sons. It's something he gets to do with his sons, and he's always Ram always falls or almost always falls on Father's Day weekend. Um,
Yeah, we have some really touching sequences with Tim and his sons out there.
yeah.
And depending on how fast we're going, it can be like I think 2018 we were somewhere, it was like Iowa or Missouri.
On
Um,
Father's Day?
yeah,
No, it always falls on like the weekend we launch. It's always like day 2 or 3.
hmm. I remember cornfields.
I mean, he has several moments with his son that you might just be conflating
Mm,
with Father's Day.
a different touching father-son moment that
Yes.
was later on.
But they're great because they bring a lot of character to the movie because they're they're brothers, but they're part of a set of triplets. So they're very close and they razz each other all the time. And they're both in the military. Matt is a weatherman, and Scott was a medic and now is an electrician. So they're these like very like disciplined like dudes that do like very serious jobs, but then they get together on this race and they're just like dumb kids like messing with each other and like but then they'll snap into like focus mode and they'll just be like, all right, we got to get up the course, you do this, and
Yeah, I think that focus is part of what makes team skippers so successful. And then of course we also have the crew chief Bernie, who's a big part of this as well. But it's a well-oiled machine. I mean, it takes a day or two to kind of grease the wheels and find the rhythm of how we're going to keep doing this across the whole country. But I know Matt has talked about how there's some of the boot camp training is like sleep deprivation training. And a lot of times at the start of the race, people don't sleep for up to 40 hours or so because it's so crucial to make sure everybody is gelling and in sync. And so these kind of leaders of the team, these I think they were also crew chiefs or
yeah.
co-crew chiefs.
Mhm.
They have to make sure the team is functioning before they go to sleep. So, yeah, on average, by the way, probably everyone is getting about 2 to 3 hours of sleep every 24 hours.
Yeah, a good 4-hour nap is like, ooh, baby.
Yeah, you feel rested after 4.
And it's crazy how like your body is just like, I feel amazing after 4 hours, whereas like if I got 4 hours now, I'd be like dead on the floor.
Actually, we'll keep answering the why question
Yeah,
as a
like,
tangent
we're
on
getting off
sleep.
topic.
Sleep is a whole thing. We
Whole thread.
yeah, an arc, if you will. Just because what sleep deprivation does to people, especially the day 6 or 7, people become very stripped down in a lot of ways. As anyone can attest if they haven't gotten a couple good nights of sleep. So that's an interesting, I guess, phenomenon of RAM is sort of the lack of sleep.
So to get back to your question, so the kind of why for Tim kind of answered it, and then it's also his whole thing of like he always says RAM is like a year's worth of life experience all wrapped up in a week, and that's kind of his go-to answer for that is like if I do RAM for this 1 week out of the year, I feel like I can get through anything for the rest of the year. And then, some of the other answers that we've gotten from other writers, you get the typical answer, the typical athlete answer of just like, I just love to compete. It's this crazy thing. It's this crazy adventure. Because a lot of these writers are doing it for the first time. They've heard about RAM. It's kind of got this like, kind of like almost like a cult-like reverence to this race. Like it's kind of just like in like the zeitgeist of the cycling community.
Well, yeah, because I mean, when you mentioned that this is the hardest bicycle race in the world, right? That's I think is that how it's described, or I
That's
think
that's what it's kind of known as.
yeah. So when you hear that, it does feel like if I want to challenge myself as a human being, as a bicycle, like if you like bicycling and you want to challenge yourself, that seems like the place to
Yeah,
put test your limits and do all that. Yeah.
A lot of these cyclists are like triathletes and they do Ironmans and stuff, and and but they've never done RAM, and that's kind of been like on their bucket list.
Yeah. Great. Oh no, I was gonna say like it's something I don't know if if I'm built for that, but I understand the allure. I know I have a buddy that like I was talking to him recently. He's a unicyclist, so he yeah.
Unicycle across the country.
And he's the type to like take on. He's like, yeah, I want to do a marathon. And I'm like, you haven't done a 5K yet. Like, can you just like build your way up? And he's like, he just goes all out. So he signed up for like 100-mile
A
unicycle,
century.
a century unicycle race thing. And I'm like, 100 miles, that's so far. But then you say 3,000. I'm like, okay, 100 seems pretty doable. It's a
Yeah,
unicycle, but I
they'll
don't know.
do that in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
Literally a few months ago, I was out with Tim out in the desert for a different race, just going to support him.
Brago Springs.
Brago Springs, yeah.
To be the first major time station.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was out there supporting Tim, and two of our other riders, who live in San Diego, just decided to just pop over for the weekend, and they literally just like they rode. It was like a 6-hour ride, and they just like, which is about 100 miles, and they just rode in from San Diego to the desert just to like say hi, and then they spent the night and rode back in the morning.
nice.
It was like that was 100 miles each way,
Yeah.
and they're just like, yeah, it's just like a weekend ride.
Yeah, it sounds kind of Forrest Gumpy,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Speaking of Forrest Gump,
Yes.
we do ride through the kind of iconic Monument Valley on the race, which there's a scene from Forrest Gump there when he's running and he stops those big vistas in Utah. Yeah. So we have this great drone shot of a bike going through in the same spot with the same landscape. So came up naturally. That's a little fun fact.
Nice. It was it naturally came up. Okay. So I don't know if there's anything left to tap into on the whys, but maybe that's a good gist of the racers and what gets people involved. And I'm trying to imagine. I almost want to go back to like the original Craigslist ad for some reason. Because I'm just wondering about this
That's
team skipper guy. Like, is this something that he's always this has never been documented in this way before? Like, he's never like he just. What was the inspiration for like reaching out initially? Is kind of what I feel is missing a little bit.
hmm So one thing we find when we're like writing about say the Kickstarter or just about the film is we have two different crews. We have our film crew and the race crew. So Team Skipper, you know, has the people that make that race function, and that's like the drivers, navigators, cooks, mechanics. But so Tim was reaching out, building
For race crew. He
for
was
those
looking for
people.
race crew, but there was like an asterisk that was like, and maybe someone to film.
Mhm.
But he had someone try and film a few years ago, years
Mhm.
ago, I think, that
Yeah.
it just didn't ever really pan out.
Yeah, there's archival, like obviously people have filmed and took photos, and the RAM organization itself also has a media team that captures teams at the start line and finish lines
And throughout.
and throughout. So there's a lot of footage going into it. But yeah, that's what also makes this interesting is it is a lot of times people getting together for the first time, like strangers meeting, just having that same kind of call to adventure. So that's what's cool. You have I guess, and that's the difference between 2018 and 2022. Also, we have our sort of reoccurring characters like Matt and Scott, Skipper, Tim, like Bernie, the crew chief. And yet then there's a whole new group of people, new writers, new crew, etc.
So to kind of more succinctly answer your question, he was reaching out for a crew. He has kind of his like handful of go-to guys that crew for him. And some each year is kind of different. Some years it's easier to get, more people that have done it before, that know each other. But this year, particularly in 2018, I think it had come together fairly quickly on his end as well. So he was just like reaching out to find
Right.
crew, because even if people have never done it before, like sometimes you literally just need bodies to drive a van. Otherwise you can't make it.
Yeah. I mean, I was half remembering as I asked the question. It was like I remember it was stated that he was looking for a photographer, or like you said, maybe film this thing, where it wasn't really that wasn't the objective of the thing. He's just trying to he's just trying to assemble his team to do the thing again this year. It's not really thinking. Well, it was, like you mentioned, he enjoys spreading awareness of the race. He wants to get it out to more people, so it felt like more intentional. But it also sounds like it kind of just came up, like you said in your 30-minute conversation that you had. It was just like a
Like you
like
threw in photographer, and then it expanded beyond there to let's film this puppy.
But it was also so it's also worth mentioning. So like that first year we were also support crew. Like we were also driving and navigating and getting people on bikes and filming like on top of that. It was like our first priority was making the race happen, and filming was like second. Because at the end of the day, the team has to get from point A to point B.
yeah. If there's no race happening, there's nothing to film, right? Is that the thought there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, because here.
Yeah, so that's part of the idea we talked about in the beginning also is because we were so plugged in, we were able to get, we were right there with the whole crew. But on top of that, we did, have our own separate media van where we could specifically go up and set up and get the right shot. Like we were still being very intentional about how to film this thing. But actually, a dramatic moment in 2018 was we had a number of the race crew. It was just a little too much for them. They decided that they wanted to call it a day. So I think it was about La Vita, Colorado, when two people decided they didn't want to do the race. And also, day one in Oceanside, someone got cold feet. We're like, no way I'm doing this. I'm backing out. And so by Colorado, we were 3 people of the main race crew short, which of course means less driver rotations, less sleep rotations, less all these things. So we kind of had this moment where we all looked at each other in the eye and we're like, there's going to be times we're going to need to start driving. We're going to need to, potentially take a bike off the back of a van and set it up and get more involved to like as a necessity to help get this team across. And it's almost like one of those documentary or even journalism questions of like, if you see, how much do you interact with the subject or
We became the subject, one of the subjects, basically.
yeah, so that's also where it gets very first person. And when we were like, oh, literally put you in the driver's seat, because it's like, okay, we film a dramatic sequence on the side of the road, and it's like, oh wait, I gotta hop in and then drive my van up the road. And so it's like you have moments where it gets a little the camera, or you become aware of us more after that moment, like as the people behind the camera, and you see more of us on camera because just because that's where the story went. So that was an interesting development in 2018, which I also think is what makes it unique. Like it's not, I'll just be straight up, it's a little bit our subjective experience of it. You're aware of us there. In 2022, because of the bigger team, we knew what we were getting into. That's what I mean when the filmmaking approach changed a little bit. We were able to tackle it. Perhaps we had a little more elbow room to film more intentionally in some ways, as opposed to the kind of organic approach that unfolded in 2018. And that intercutting is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, can we hear a little bit more about why you went back after all that?
Well, we were working on kind of prepping the stage that we're at now with just the 2018 footage about a year ago, when Tim basically called us and was like, I'm doing my 20th RAM this year, want to come back. And we were like, well, okay.
I mean, there's just this overwhelming sense of this story just isn't finished, and there's more. Something else is going to happen. There's you know, this one's going to be post COVID. It's going to be, obviously a huge milestone. Um, we also just a whole new cast of characters. We had Tinker Juarez, who's an Olympian mountain biker, was on. We had people who've done Ram a few times, so some people who've never done it before. So it's like almost, it feels like borderline a sequel, where you have more people um, coming in some ways, bigger production value as well. And
And you say 20th. Is this the one that broke the world record, or did you already have it at that time? I think that was a he owns the world record for most attempts or most completions of the race. So was that a part of the cell?
He had already had it in 2018 with, I believe, 18 at the time. Um, and I want to say the guy that's behind him is only behind him by a couple. But I think just the 20, I mean, it is breaking the record because he's breaking his own record. But yeah, just the 20th number was a nice like wrap up. Even though he's not done, he's actually going again in 2023. But yeah, it was just kind of a big milestone for him. So
Great. I'm trying to think. Oh my word. Okay. So, all right. So going back to do the race again from your perspectives, I guess I'm curious to hear about the biggest takeaways from doing it the first time and what you changed differently going in, because you've kind of mentioned that you changed your ways and you went in with a different perspective. Now that you know what you're getting yourself into, you can prep maybe a little bit better. Who knows? How much can you really prep? Who knows? But what were the biggest things that you changed up just getting into it from time one to time two?
um, well, just in general, little technical hiccups that we were able to iron out um, better, and then from kind of a more of a creative standpoint, um, the whole like how I mentioned in 2018, the footage is so like eyes wide open. Like that was, I mean, we were aware of that, but it almost wasn't intentional. It just kind of like happened because it had to happen. Like the footage this year is a little bit more like um we've seen a thing or two. Like we know what we're doing. We know what to look for. We know kind of like what storylines will likely evolve. Um, and so it was just a little bit more intentional um, in terms of uh, knowing, to kind of always get like an in and an out in a scene, kind of. That makes sense. Just, yeah, just kind of knowing where the drama was going to be because we'd seen it before. Things happen. There's a ton of like overlapping themes and things that kind of go wrong, that kind of like always go wrong on Ram, that like are just kind of a part of it, like the sleep and missing turns and, little kerfuffles between, individuals or whatever, that we just kind of were more aware to like look out for.
right, I feel like I almost think of it as we had a better schedule the second time, just because knowing the race, like for example, Dana mentioned Borrego Springs. The Borrego Spring, or going into Borrego Springs, is the glass elevator, one of the largest descents on Ram, where the racers get up to 60 miles an hour going down. And so the first time we're doing it, we're getting very offhanded, like the glass elevator's coming up, and it's like, oh, okay, so we're capturing that on the fly. But now it's like, okay, we know that's happening. Let's have our drone ready. Let's like make sure we get a little pre-interview of like, who's taking it. Are they going to coordinate to be like, oh, this guy's the fastest on the descents? We get something about how Van's are going to meet him at the bottom because vans won't be able to keep up going that fast. And you can kind of design a sequence a little bit more knowing what it is. And same thing with, all of, I guess, the huge landmarks like Monument Valley. We go through Gettysburg. We go through, Appalachians and the Rockies, all of that. So you can kind of, we having that foresight was very helpful from a schedule sort of point of view. And actually, I would love to, or if that answers that so far,
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, what do you want to jump into?
I'd love to just touch on the intercutting or how we're approaching having.
Yeah, how the movie works,
Yeah,
having two separate years interwoven. Yeah, what's the plan from the director's standpoint here? Yes.
yeah. Well, as you can see on our Kickstarter, we're still cutting it, but we've more or less written a lot of it. But the idea is to stay more or less in the present of one of the races, the 2022, and find moments that allows us to intercut back into 2018 and beyond into the others. So we might have transitions like Tim going to sleep in 2022 in the back of a van next to Tinker Juarez, and we fade out, and all of a sudden we fade back in, and now he's in a Ryder van, but it's Hiroko Kobayashi next to him, and it's 2018, and we have a different 2018 sequence, and then
But like in the same place.
yeah, but also in the same van. And Tim has also touched on he's done it. When you do it 20 times, you kind of be like, oh wait, so in our crossing in 2012 we made this time, but it was with these racers. But our crossing in 2005, it's this and this. And
It
so,
all kind of bleeds together. You just
so in the edit, we're gonna try to capture this idea of done this so many times. It's like a cumulative piece. Obviously, Tim's our main character, and so a lot of this is because of what he's put together. So he's the constant through all of these. Is that he's there.
I will say, just as a somewhat related side note, like doing it the second time, like there were points where, the first time was such a blur. And then you come back the second time, and I remember like on like day 2, like coming to like this specific like gas station with like a barn on the side that like had like some painting on it that I remembered. And it was just like a weird moment of like, oh wait, I know this place. Because in 2018, like Bernie and all the guys that have done it a bunch of times, like we would always be so impressed. Like we'd just kind of like look at each other. Like they'd say something like, oh yeah, like we're coming up on blah 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 road, and there's gonna be a right hand turn, and remember the stop sign there, and then you make a right, and we're just like, how do they know this? There are like thousands and thousands of turns throughout this race, like, and they like know like a specific stop sign. And then coming back in 2022, I like noticed a few spots, and I was like, ooh, I
and
know things.
and filmed them. So you'll see
Yeah.
you'll see the parallel of 4 years difference between
And
these
kind of
specific locations.
the difference between an 8-man team and a 4-man team, because naturally the 8-man team is going to go a little bit faster because their riders get a little more rest time, their legs are a bit fresher.
Right.
And so coming up to a familiar landmark at like a different time of day, or like, on a different even day, like you're 12 hours ahead of where we were in 2018 or something like that.
I just I guess a side note off that side note, it is a very cool from a photography or I guess cinematography point of view is it's like a free for all. I mean, we're shooting all hours of the day, all kinds of different locations and landscapes. So we have so much cool stuff. We captured sunset and dusk and dawn and every day. It was great. Like we'd have all cameras up, and of course the most beautiful times of day. And some of these storms we would go through were crazy too. Um, I don't know. It's just
Yeah,
I just
lots
got
of
lost
beautiful
thinking of that.
landscapes and scenery to see. I don't doubt it one bit. No, that's cool. Um, I'm trying to think of like maybe is there anything I wanted to jump into a little bit of you two as individuals
Oh no.
and
Pass that to
and
Dan.
like backgrounds in filmmaking in general and like where you want to be headed with life and dreams and stuff. No pressure. But before we get into that, anything that we're missing on the doc that we didn't bring up yet that our audience should that we
Sure, why not? I just want to point out that um, that as you've heard from all of this, that I really love these small independent documentaries that just happen. They come together, or even the ones that get big that we've all seen. I just love that how really a documentary is you pick up a camera and you capture an interesting story, and I really think that's what we did with this. And I think that's what's going to give it its charm and what makes it unique and special is it, we just picked up cameras and captured this crazy story.
Yeah, we all kind of fell in love with documentary filmmaking as we did this.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of intimidating going in because we'd never particularly done documentary work. But like immediately we were all just like, this is so fun. Like there's so much possibility in just capturing everything and seeing where the story goes.
Mm-hmm. And not to, I mean, I love the big docs also, um, but I think there is almost when you're doing it on a kind of more indie scale, it lends itself to perhaps more authenticity or kind of more of a raw um, result because you know we don't have a helicopter or we don't have certain resources to capture in a certain way. But I think that actually gives it perhaps a more
We've got the grit.
the grit. We get to the truth, or
yeah
you know what I mean. I don't know.
yeah just I'm a big fan. Well, documentaries are wonderful in that way in general, especially I feel like there's a lot of potential, like you said, with just the indie space. It seems a little bit, I don't know, I don't feel like the difference. There's lots of potential with an indie doc versus like an indie movie versus a budgeted movie. Like indie docs can still be incredibly captivating
Yes, I know
and
what you're saying. I know
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
saying.
Can you say it better?
Um,
Well,
no, I don't know how to say it, but I know what you're
you're
saying.
Henry was
We can-
essentially saying it, but
Oh, I'm back.
well, I
Yeah,
mean,
basically, like I don't know, to say do sci-fi really well, like maybe a massive budget would help because you can build a bigger spaceship or whatever. But like indie doesn't necessarily need a massive budget to capture a human story or an intimate story. It's like you really just need to be there, you need to be plugged in, and you need to film it.
yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah, because I know for me thinking about doing a documentary, it sounds terrifying
Mm-hmm.
because I come from narrative space. So it's like, let's plan the exact story we're going to go in to get. These are the exact shots you want to get. This is where we're going to do it. But when you're jumping into a doc, especially the first time, you don't know exactly what the story is going in and thinking as directors, it's like, all right, well, that's why I'm like, I'm almost get confused. I'm like, how does a director even make a documentary in the first place? It's like, but it's being okay, yeah,
Well, we were there. So it's not like we're getting heaps and heaps of footage and having to sift through it and find the story. We were there. We felt everything that was happening. We saw everything that was happening. And then just going back and rewatching the footage, it just kind of like puts everything back into like you're just zeroing in on like what you experienced and what you saw other people experience, and it's kind of easier in a way than writing a script, because the story is what the story is. It might not be exactly what we thought it was going to be going in, but now that it's happened, like the story is what the story is. So
I think it's interesting, even thinking about it, like directing a documentary just doesn't feel like the perfect fit, just because we're also very heavily producing it, and we're cinematographers on it, and you know we're also our own coordinators, our own all of these things. So it's not like we're just in there, yelling at or action and cut kind of thing. It's more like just I don't know. There almost needs another word.
Yeah, I mean, you're there living it, and
Yeah.
you are just keeping your senses up on like what the story is, and putting little kernels in the back of the brain on like, all right, I think this is where we're headed, and then, like you said, when you get to post, it becomes more clear,
Mhm.
and this is where you are right now with
yeah.
the post.
And like because the story is largely about kind of like what people get out of RAM, and not just the writers, we are also exploring what the crew members kind of get out of it as well, just the experience as a whole. Us having that kind of firsthand experience, the first time experience and the return experience, kind of makes it more like emotionally easy to tap into, because we did it and we have our own feelings about what we've gotten out of RAM, and it is a little bit of a universal thing. And so having experienced it obviously um, makes that easier to map out.
Great, wonderful.
So the other thing I want to, I'm just kidding.
The last thing that I didn't mention before, but it just came to me now. Yeah. Great. So jumping into I want people to learn more about the individuals here and who are the creators behind this documentary. So, like, I know Dayna, you and I, like you mentioned before, we freelance as script supervisors. Um, squeaky chair. Uh, and there's that. Henry,
Kind of the odd man out.
you work in the AD department, right? A lot, assistant director, department production. Um, but we all have director stuff in our brains and whatnot. But I'm trying to figure out like whether okay, let's do a little bit of going back to the beginning and then also look into the future. And I mean, yes. So Henry, do you want to start or?
Sure. Was born in Visalia, California.
Great.
Do we start there?
Wherever you want to start. I guess like maybe what the I like to think about what the goals were, what captured you in the beginning, what sent you in this creative direction initially growing up, and what the intention was then. Like, oh, I want to be a director, I want to be a writer, or maybe you wanted to be an actor. Like, I don't know how you first got your initial steps into the film industry. Um, so maybe starting there on what piqued your curiosity to start.
Yeah, sure. Oh, it's so easy talking about the doc, but um, well, yeah. So I grew up in Central California, just 3 hours north of LA, on a dairy farm. A lot of people don't realize how much agriculture is out there, but there's a lot. And kind of living in a small town, um, I guess we watched a good amount of movies and always intrigued. And I specifically remember the behind the scenes on a number of them, the VHSs. It's probably Star Wars. And just kind of being like, oh man, someone's making this. It just doesn't come out of nowhere. So, yeah, it's probably similar to a lot of our stories where we just started picking up and making stories, doing effects with in camera. And uh, that became a big part of my thought process of wanting to head that direction. Like, I loved it more than anything. And then we would have reasons, like my grandma lived in Southern California, and so we would go visit and go through LA, and I'd see the big billboards and be like, oh man, LA is kind of where it's at. Maybe I want to go to LA and become a filmmaker. So yeah, go to college,
Well,
film school.
well, I guess before you jump, you're going too fast. So you were saying that there was you were playing with stuff early, like you picked up a camera somehow and started doing like in-camera effects and things. Like what? Like how old are you at this point? Like is this back home? Is this at home with some camera that your parents had, or is this was this at school through some program or something?
It was at home with the parents. I feel like the first one was like kind of a point and shoot digital camera that you could record video, pause the video, and then basically hit play on recording. And so you could almost edit in camera with that. And so just some classic have someone jump up and then pause and then they vanish. Kind of have a move and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, of course, a notable mention, I have quite a few siblings who became close collaborators and actors.
Close collaborators, yes. They were happy to be involved, or
Most were quite happy to be involved. Yeah, cousins too. Yeah, so, but then, high school years, things got, the stories got a little more complexity to them. I started writing some scripts.
air quotes over there, scripts.
I became the like film video guy for my high school that we would show like 5-7 minute short at pep rallies before a big football game and be starring like the quarterback or Mo the Hawk, our mascot, on some sort of mission. And then there were times where we'd shoot it and it would turn into live because we'd be in the full auditorium. So like they'd run out a door in the video, and then Mo the Hawk would run in, and
Wow.
then the cheer squad would come out and it'd be a dance number, and like so we kind of had this multimedia little things that I kind of I guess was directing, air quotes again. But all of that was just so fun. And so that's why I guess can I forward now?
Sure. Sure. So that's why so you never lost track of it throughout all that. You became the guy and you enjoyed being the film guy, and
Yeah.
then you're like, all right,
Yeah.
let's keep on the train.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a good variety too. Zombie movies. Got the whole drama class to become zombies. Anyways. I could go into all these little micro productions if we want to spend
Well,
time.
I'm curious. No, I guess maybe just to do a general sweep over that. Like, what kind of stories were you enjoying telling at that time? Like, what were you digging into in yourself during that phase? Looking back.
Whew, that's a good question, Eddie. I think it's kind of tough because I do think there was a lot of varieties, like across genre. We had,
Cause I'm thinking like even right now when I'm making stuff, I know I made a thing earlier this year, kind of just for fun with some friends, and my DP was like, Eddie, you're making a lot of stories about just like bad roommates here, like, and I was like, oh, I should probably stop venting about the bad roommates situations. So I don't know, just that's surface level version of that, but
I honestly think the biggest through line is probably trying to mimic or create something that I had seen, because it would be like, oh, let's do a zombie movie like this. Let's do a Nerf war like that, or we even had one that was more or less a full parody of like Taken, where the quarterback gets kidnapped and like someone has to, so it was probably a lot of wanting to be like these filmmakers I admired.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
yeah, I guess a lot of us learn that way is let's copy the stuff that we like and try to replicate it and just kind of give that little twist to it to make it our own. And
mhm,
that seems like,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Another probably layer, and then I'll stop on talking about my early childhood movies.
No, we love it. We love it.
Is for sure comedy is another through line. I always feel like making it maybe a little bit wacky or have a little bit of goofiness to it made it feel more removed or from like um, you know in some ways, which just a notable mention. I'm talking about my own like sort of narrative conceptions. The documentary brain is completely different,
Yeah, yeah.
even though there is plenty of comedic moments on 30 on. Um, but yeah, for example, even the zombie movies, we'd like let's do the most gruesome zombie blood guts everywhere, but then they get up and do like Monster Mash or something, and it's like just oh, the tone always had like I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Should I pass it to
No,
Dana for a
yeah,
hot second
Dana.
here?
Let's talk about Dana.
Kind of like,
So let's hear about your let's hear about your childhood. Let's hear about okay, so script supervising. We don't have to dive into the craft of continuity here, but we can. No. Remind me to or remind let's share with the people at home. Who is Dana?
Jeez.
And yeah, what got you? Because again, the title, you're both directors and producers on this doc. So
Well, we started as just we were co-directing. We kind of became producers as a necessity in
yeah,
the indie field. You just kind of end up doing everything.
as you do, if you want to get it done,
Exactly.
you do it. And
Right.
yeah, so flashing back on you, is directing something you want to do more of, or what got you started in the film stuff?
Yeah, so I had related to something that Henry said basically. So my first kind of recollection of like watching a movie and like watching kind of like the behind the scenes things on like the DVD extras um was the same thing of like I think everyone kind of has that moment as a kid where you realize like, oh, someone's making this and like I could do that. Um and when I was like 12, Pirates of the Caribbean, the original,
Classic.
and the Lord of the Rings were like on repeat, like repeat. Like,
Nice, nice.
which is
Classics.
interesting because like it's not at all like the kind of genre stuff. Like I don't really gravitate towards genre stuff as an adult, but those just totally captured my imagination. I was obsessed with watching all the behind the scenes stuff. Um, Probably because I wanted to be a pirate, but um, as we all do.
Yeah.
Um, but I was my kind of like primary identity growing up was as an athlete. Um, I was always very creative, but never really like went towards it. I was always too busy with sports and stuff, and then but always loved movies and kind of had this like daydream in the back of my head that maybe I would make them one day. But it was always very much like a like intangible kind of future daydream thing. Um, and so I originally went to college for marine biology. I thought that was very practical and scientific.
Yeah.
And I kind of had a moment where I mean, a lot of things happened to divert me from that path, but it essentially came down to a now or never kind of thing. Like if I wanted to try and become a filmmaker, it was going to have to be now. Um, so I dropped out of college and went home and went to just the community college by my house. Just happened to have a really good film program, like super hands-on, super like below the line, like learn to grip and do all the stuff.
And below the line means, for people that don't
Like
know,
crew, not like
like
directors and producers and actors. Below the line, it's like a,
I don't know, the boots on the ground, I
yeah,
guess.
the camera people, the art people, the grips, the lighting, the
Script soup.
script supervisor is also below the line. That's actually where I fell into script supervising, was at Saddleback. Someone needed me to, or we needed to like get on the like, second year productions as like part of a credit. And my teacher recommended me to one of the films, going out as just like, because I was just like a studious girl.
Sure. Script supervisor
And
vibes.
script supervisor vibes. And he was like, "You want to script supervise?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is, but sure." Someone gave me like a 5-minute little intro course, which looking back was completely wrong. And so I just started doing it on student films, and then I started working, and then I panicked and said I need to go to school and get a degree. So I went to CSUN, where I met Henry, and started doing more film stuff there. Directed a couple shorts at Saddleback and at CSUN, and then and all the while kind of working as a script supervisor, kind of part time while I was in school, and then once I graduated, started doing it full time. But yeah, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this before, where we kind of like, we want to kind of dip our toes in different things. I don't want to be like a full-time script supervisor. I like being able to like switch it up. So being able to direct things here and there is a really good change of pace. And I do a bit of like art stuff too on the side, and just in general, I get bored easily, so I like to be able to.
You gotta keep it fresh,
Yeah,
right?
I gotta keep it fresh. Gotta do different things.
Yeah, because we watch directors work all day as script supervisors, and sometimes you just need to get in there too and be like, all right, cool. And this, yeah, I don't know.
Well, script supervising is such a like intense, like not single focus. You're focusing on a million things at one time, but it's like it's so intense and like singular that it is really, and there are creative aspects to it,
Yeah.
of course, but I'm a very hands-on person, so I like to be able to like get out and do different things and be a little bit more creative.
Yeah, and script soup is almost kind of hands off. It's
Yeah.
it's mostly
It's in your
internal work.
brain. It's like your brain is on fire for 14 hours.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
then
it
you
is.
speak up twice all day.
Yeah,
Or,
and then one of those times you get completely ignored.
sometimes.
And one of them, they're like, "Oh yeah, okay.
Well,
Yeah, it was my idea, but okay."
yeah, one is completely ignored, and one is, I don't know, we'll think, and then they think on it a little bit, and they realize you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, okay.
What was the original question?
I was thinking
Just-
about the initial intention getting into it. So, like you mentioned, you fell into script supervising during college, but are you wanting to do like more? What do you want to do more of
Yeah,
moving forward? Is the question.
I would like to do more directing. I would like to get a little more into art department. My whole thing is like I want to be able to do different things. So I love being able to script supervise sometimes, and then go off and direct something. Like working on this is like a great outlet. And I work at an art studio for kids part time. That's like my
Nice.
whole thing is just like I want my career to be like very diverse.
Yeah, because I know I just came off of a feature end of last year up in Lake Tahoe, and there was we had a guy, our production designer, I guess technically what he was, he lives up in Tahoe, but he's a part of like all the unions down here in LA. So
Mm-hmm.
he does the electric, he does production design, he does. So whenever he needs work or wants work, he just drives down here and hits up all his contacts. And he's like, "Yeah, I guess I'm production design today, or I'm helping out art today, or I'm helping out this today."
Dude, that's where I need to get. I'll just like live in Big Bear and snowboard and then come down the mountain for jobs once in a while.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, okay, all right. What's up, Henry?
Okay.
Let me. What else do I got here? All right. Yeah, going back to Henry, I guess, for just maybe to wind us down. But moving forward for you, what do you want to be doing more of? Because I know, like you've worked on quite many different types of sets, like this documentary experience here um, versus like second ADing bigger shows or first ADing medium indie shows or like you're kind of it seems like you dip around in many different spaces. So where do you ideally wanna where do you want to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, it's one of those things where I guess my go-to response is like I keep working on everyone else's movies and productions and shows, um, with the goal of to keep working on my own and our own, um, on this one. So it's and that's just kind of what you got to do. You got to keep paying rent and working on all this other stuff. So I almost have two different tracks. I have my sort of career to keep me, um, you know, I guess what I consider my work, or my, I don't know, my work, and then I have my creative work. They're two different lanes. So on the work front, it is a lot of assistant director. Um, I, like I said briefly earlier, I started as assistant camera, and then was on a lot of very chaotic music videos, where I could clearly see night and day of when they had an AD and when they did not have an AD.
Stay
And
away from stay away from music videos, kids.
when they have an AD, it was like this is like, well, it's somebody's thinking about the most efficient game plan, and I was inspired by that. And there were a few that come to mind where I'm like, wow, that's like that's a cool job. I'm interested. Um, And so I started second ADing, and it's always interesting because it's kind of there's only a lot of times only the two, the first and the second. So I've only worked with probably 4 or 5 different first ADs, as a second AD, and just repeat a lot of productions with those same people. You become like a
Yeah, you become their
a
go-to,
team.
and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And to clarify for people, second AD is like the first AD is managing the main set, and second AD is usually at some sort of base camp
Mm-hmm.
and doing. It's yeah. It's a I don't know how would you describe second AD for people that don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's good to think of it like like a Christmas Carol. Honestly, the first AD is the ghost of Christmas present. The second AD deals with the future. They're building the call sheet for the next day. The first AD is handling what's happening in the moment, and then if you have a second AD, a lot of times they're doing like production reports in addition to the present moment. So like it's kind of like the past. But yeah, the second usually is in the office making uh, the call sheets for the very next day. They send out the preliminary ones to all the department heads, make sure everybody knows what's going on. You're keeping track of the crew, who's on, who's off. If we need a specialty food stylist or we need a stunt coordinator, or which actors are. You're giving all the actors a heads up. Second AD is almost like a kiosk of information on the schedule and what you're shooting. Um, and then, sometimes it's like, oh, this actor lost availability on Wednesday, so we got to move Thursday stuff to Wednesday and rebook this person here. And it's like this domino effect, the whole schedule shifting. And so a lot of times the second is dealing with that kind of things. it's looking at a calendar all day, honestly.
Yeah, you deal with that, and then you find your moments to sneak in with the first and talk through it, and then go back and adjust and blah blah blah.
Right.
Because they have information, you have information.
Right.
It's
Or
fun. It's fun stuff.
the first is like, we're a little behind, we're gonna push this scene to tomorrow or whatever, and then you got to rechange your call sheet and all that. So yeah, I've done second for a while, but then this last year and a half or so, I've been dipping my toes more into the first AD as well, which it's all of that and being plugged into all of that, but you're also boots on the ground on set, like um, kind of like I always say it's kind of like a COO, where it's like operations, like we make sure, okay, we're gonna wrap out of this, make sure we're prepping the next stage for moving, and it's like basically like an efficiency manager, there's no lost time. So I will say, I've always thought that if I'm working on other people's stuff, I kind of like being an AD and doing AD work. There's a thrill of a good schedule or a good call sheet, or a day that's like, wow, we scheduled this perfectly. We had just enough time. Or so, and I like that you do have to interact with every single department. You got to know what the DP's thinking, that it's going to take extra time to move this crane or this whatever in, and costume needs extra time for this, and it's that kiosk idea of being kind of, I guess,
yeah, you're a central
holistic,
hub.
or,
Yeah.
So that's kind of a fun place to be, I think, and I hope to keep going down that path while also doing, obviously this documentary is a big thing we've been working on for years. So we've been nurturing that, and
So it's kind of like almost like the classic one for you, one for me kind of thing, except
little
it's
bit.
a little bit more for them, and
It's like 3 for them, 1 for me.
yeah,
And then sometimes it's like, I
yeah.
don't know.
I mean, that's
The
what we
timing.
do. I mean, yeah, I'm in the same boat here.
Yeah.
Script supervisor, growing up that, and then on the side, directing stuff and writing stuff, and going down both lanes. So here we are. Great. All right. I feel like that's pretty much it. We did it great. Good work, everybody.
Yes.
It's the end
Thanks,
of the
Eddie.
show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, thanks for being on. We're just gonna go ahead and throw some links and plugs at everybody. So let's clarify, where can we find you as individuals, and then we'll spotlight the doc one more time.
On all my socials, I'm hashbrowns101. Hit me up. I'm probably on Instagram the most, but I don't know.
I am DK_Smitty on Instagram. That's usually where I am the most. And then our socials for 30 On are all 30ondoc.com is the website, and then just at 30ondoc. And that's 30 like the number but spelled out, on, and doc, DOC.
Great. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again. That's the show. And
Support indie documentary. Help us make this movie.
do it. Click now. All right.
Ram.
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Boom, boom, boom.